Johnny Carson once exposed 9 legendary Golden Age guests he believed were truly awful people. For 3 decades, Carson welcomed America's brightest celebrities into homes nationwide, turning interviews into must-watch television. His quick wit and friendly charm made it feel like audiences were eavesdropping on old pals reminiscing. Yet once the applause died down and the lights faded, Carson's demeanor often shifted dramatically. Insiders claimed the late-night king carried a private list of stars he secretly despised. A former Tonight Show producer who spent more than 10 years beside him revealed that Carson never let his professionalism crack on screen. But during off-camera breaks, he would sometimes lean toward Ed McMahon and murmur, "That person should be banned from Hollywood or anywhere near children." Toward the end of his life, Carson spoke more openly about the famous names he had loathed in silence for years. Accounts shared with close friends revealed shocking behavior from icons who carefully polished their reputations for the public. Among his most disturbing memories was of a legendary actress who seemed delicate and kind on air, but viciously berated a young staff member backstage until security stepped in. Another unforgettable moment involved a beloved male star whom Carson allegedly caught in a revolting act inside his dressing room, so alarming that the host nearly contacted the authorities. Carson made it clear these weren't simply demanding personalities or egos out of control. In his view, they were dangerous individuals disguised as glamorous entertainers. He described them as predators and manipulators who thrived because Hollywood shielded their darkest flaws for decades. But to understand why the first person on Carson's secret blacklist earned his fiercest resentment, we must revisit a private confrontation never before shared with the public. Joan Crawford, the reigning queen of Hollywood, whose elegance masked a chilling heart. When Crawford appeared on The Tonight Show in 1970, audiences believed they were seeing the epitome of grace and sophistication. Perfectly styled and flawlessly poised, she radiated the magic of classic cinema. Behind closed doors, however, multiple Tonight Show employees described an entirely different personality. "She was one of the most emotionless guests I ever spoke with," Carson confided to his biographer years later. "Talking to her," he said, "felt like conversing with a beautiful sculpture, stunning but hollow." Even before stepping into the studio, Crawford's demands caused significant disruption. She sent a 4-page document detailing the exact lighting, chair position, desk height, and even required the studio temperature be locked at 67 degrees. When she finally arrived 3 hours early, she insisted on using her personal makeup crew, dismissing NBC's award-winning artists. What truly revealed her nature was the striking contrast in how she treated individuals depending on their status. She acted like royalty with Johnny, remembered one stagehand, but when a young assistant mistakenly walked into her dressing room with the water she requested, Crawford erupted in fury. Witnesses said she unleashed insults so vile that staff in the hallway stood frozen. She allegedly called the 20-year-old woman a mindless little tramp and mocked her by saying she'd be better off working in a brothel. Humiliated, the assistant ran away in tears, while Crawford demanded she be fired immediately. Carson's producer refused, which made the atmosphere icy for the rest of the taping. But even worse than her tantrums was the mechanical way she flipped her personality the moment cameras rolled. One producer compared her to a robot programmed to mimic human warmth, with every laugh and response rehearsed in advance. During breaks, she would sit silently, cold and detached, only to snap back into charm once the red light blinked on. Carson, famous for drawing authenticity from his guests, could barely connect with her at all. Afterward, he quipped to Ed McMahon, "I've interviewed corpses that showed more life." Years later, when Mommy Dearest revealed shocking stories of Crawford's alleged abuse toward her adopted children, Carson wasn't even remotely surprised. Friends recalled him saying, "I knew the truth about her from those few hours. I believed every single page." If Crawford's icy facade unsettled Carson, his next adversary represented something even worse: raw power used as a weapon. Enter Frank Sinatra, the smooth-voiced crooner with a dark edge. On television, Carson and Sinatra appeared warm, sharing laughs and musical moments performance that delighted viewers. Behind the curtain, however, Carson reportedly had no fondness for Sinatra at all. His respect for the singer's artistry didn't erase his contempt for the way Sinatra treated those he considered beneath him. If he weren't singing, he'd be working as a mob enforcer, Carson once admitted to a confidant, and he added, sometimes it seemed Sinatra was both entertainer and gangster at once.
Sinatra's visits to The Tonight Show became infamous backstage because of the unease they caused among crew members. Veteran staff recalled how he often arrived with up to 8 companions, men described not as entertainers, but more like figures you'd avoid on a dark street. Instead of blending in, these men spread across the set, watching everyone in silence, creating what one cameraman compared to working under surveillance. Yet the moment that unsettled Carson most wasn't their presence, but how Sinatra treated those he considered beneath him. On one occasion in the early 1970s, a floor manager made the standard mistake of giving Sinatra his 3-minute notice before airtime. Witnesses said Sinatra yanked the man by the tie and growled, "Nobody tells me I've got 3 minutes. I'll go out there when I want." The shaken floor manager, a battle-hardened Korean War veteran in his 50s, was left rattled by the confrontation. Watching from his monitor, Carson came close to scrapping the entire segment. It was only the producer's insistence on the ratings boost Sinatra guaranteed that convinced Carson otherwise. Another recurring issue was Sinatra's unpredictability, since he frequently pulled out of appearances without warning, once even just 2 hours before taping while already at the studio. The most telling moment happened during a commercial break when Sinatra insulted a female staffer's looks loud enough for others to hear. For once, breaking his polished professionalism, Carson cut in coldly, "We don't talk about my staff that way on this show." The air grew heavy, and Sinatra looked shocked that even Carson would call him out publicly. When the broadcast resumed, both smiled for the cameras, though insiders noted Carson's tone had grown shorter and less warm. Following that night, Carson quietly told his producer, "I don't care about the ratings. Keep him to once a year at most." This was extraordinary, since Carson almost never interfered with booking choices, let alone banned a guest. The restriction revealed just how much Carson personally disliked Sinatra's bullying behavior. But if Sinatra embodied intimidation through power, Carson's next troublesome guest embodied another issue entirely, an ego so vast it ignored boundaries. The counterpoint, some argue, is that Hollywood always had oversized personalities, none larger than Orson Welles, the visionary who considered rules optional. Welles made multiple appearances during the Carson years, delivering unforgettable TV with his booming delivery, commanding presence, and dazzling anecdotes. While audiences at home saw a charismatic genius, Carson and his team saw something different, a man convinced that television's normal structure simply didn't apply to him. After one exhausting visit, Carson reportedly muttered, "Never again. He thinks he's running Rome." Trouble usually began before Welles ever set foot in the building. According to the writing staff, he rejected every pre-planned question or topic. One writer said, "He told us our questions were too obvious, then handed back the sheet with everything crossed out." That forced Carson to improvise entire interviews with one of cinema's legends, a tricky task given Welles's rambling, time-consuming stories. In one mid-1970s appearance scheduled for 7 minutes, Welles held court for nearly 25, ignoring every signal Carson sent to wrap it up. A director later explained, "Johnny gave him every cue in the book, but Welles bulldozed through and we had to cut 2 other guests." His arrogance extended to staff as well. He refused to speak directly to assistants, instead issuing orders in the third person. He would say things like, "Tell the girl I need water," or "Ask the boy to fix the light," even when they stood right next to him. What infuriated Carson most, insiders said, was Welles treating the show as if it were his personal stage rather than Carson's. He came armed with props, switched topics midstream, and even tried to direct cameras from his seat. A former producer recalled, he once stood up and told the cameramen which angles to use. Johnny was furious. After a particularly trying segment, Carson vented to Ed McMahon, "Genius doesn't excuse everything. Being brilliant doesn't mean hijacking somebody else's program." For a man as precise about TV as Carson, Welles's disregard for time and structure was intolerable. Though Carson never denied Welles's greatness as a filmmaker, he privately came to see him as proof of how unchecked ego can swallow talent. But if Welles was a battle of
oversized personality, Carson's next challenge came from unpredictability that often turned confrontational. That combustible spirit belonged to Bette Davis, Hollywood's queen of razor-sharp put-downs. On air, she was captivating, elegant, even late in life, telling biting stories with unmatched flair. Off-air, however, her abrasiveness shocked even Carson.
"She doesn't need a stage, she needs a courtroom," he joked to McMahon after one stormy episode. Nobody should face Bette Davis without a defense lawyer. Her first offense, staff remembered, was the way she treated fellow guests. Davis routinely interrupted or talked over them, particularly younger actors or women, and sometimes literally turned her back while they spoke. One talent coordinator recalled, "If another guest got laughs, you could see her seething, ready to claw back control." Behind the scenes, her habits were worse. She demanded whiskey before going on stage, and heavy drinking sometimes fueled sharp, offensive remarks. Women who worked on the show claimed Davis often used language that was shockingly sexist or racist, even for the looser standards of the 1970s. A makeup artist once recalled Davis brushing her off, sneering, "Get me someone whose hands don't shake like a drunk." Carson typically avoided confrontation, but even he reached his limit when Davis unleashed on a cue card holder for moving too slowly during rehearsal. A production assistant once recalled that Johnny stepped forward during a tense exchange. In a calm but firm voice, he told her, "Miss Davis, on this stage, everyone is treated with respect, or else we don't continue at all." Davis seemed caught off guard, clearly not used to someone pushing back, yet she reluctantly let the matter drop. What made working with Davis so troubling for Carson was the clash between her immense talent and the way she treated others. Unlike lesser guests who could be written off, Davis was a true icon whose artistry Carson genuinely admired. Following her last visit in the early 1980s, Carson supposedly told his producer, "That's enough. No amount of Oscars makes it worth being berated by Bette Davis again." At least Davis saved her sharp comments for adults who could defend themselves. But Carson's next troublesome guest caused discomfort of a different kind. His behavior toward younger women crossed lines. That man was Mickey Rooney, the aging former child star with a notorious reputation. Rooney had once been Hollywood's biggest box office draw, dominating the industry between 1939 and 1941 and representing its golden era. Ideally, his Tonight Show appearances should have celebrated his remarkable legacy. Instead, staff remembered them for inappropriate behavior, manic energy, and instances of drunkenness. After one particularly rough show in the mid-1970s, Carson told his producer, "He acts like his height gives him permission to misbehave." Female staff members especially dreaded his presence due to his wandering hands and boundary-crossing remarks. Several assistants even asked not to work the nights Rooney was booked, aware of what might happen. He'd grab your hand while you served water, pull you close, and start asking personal questions, remembered one staffer from the late 1970s. If you tried leaving, he would cling to your wrist just long enough to make you uncomfortable. Equally worrisome was Rooney's inability to recognize when he was too intoxicated to perform. Reports from Tonight Show crew said he slurred, stumbled, and lost track of his words more than once. During one infamous 1977 taping, Rooney launched into a Judy Garland story that quickly turned inappropriate, prompting Carson to cut him off and switch topics. Off camera, Carson asked his producer, "Is this drunkenness or just who he's become?" What made things worse was the generational divide. Rooney was born in 1920, when certain behavior toward women went unchecked, if not encouraged. Johnny himself wasn't overly strict, but he did expect professionalism, a colleague later explained. Rooney, however, seemed honestly confused about why anyone took issue with his conduct. After a show where Rooney repeatedly commented on a young actress also on the panel, Carson went so far as to apologize to her personally. A longtime director recalled, "I'd never seen Johnny so ashamed of a guest." He reassured her, saying, "That's not acceptable behavior here, and you won't have to deal with it again." Staying true to his word, Rooney's bookings became less frequent, and when he did appear, Carson insisted on daytime tapings rather than live shows. Yet while Rooney's antics caused moral unease, Carson's next guest posed a completely different challenge. Demands so over the top they became infamous. Enter Zsa Zsa Gabor, the glamorous diva who pushed Carson to the edge of his patience. With her bold accent, flashy style, and playful personality, she became a regular favorite of Tonight Show audiences. To viewers, she was funny and larger than life, joking about her heritage and many marriages. Behind the cameras, though, staff knew her as one of the most high-maintenance guests in the program's history. history. After one grueling appearance, Carson quipped, "I'd rather interview a cat than Zsa Zsa. At least a cat doesn't need its own entourage and lighting crew." Her requirements began well before she set foot in the studio. Staff said she demanded her dressing room stay at 74 degrees, be filled with fresh orchids only, and stocked with Perrier containing exactly 3 ice cubes. She insisted on her own lighting technician, paid by the show, and that no female guest under 40 be booked the same night. A talent coordinator said the requests read like satire. Quote, "We thought it was a prank list at first. Whenever conditions weren't perfect, Gabor refused to leave her room, delaying the schedule for everyone." One particularly memorable clash occurred when Gabor discovered the makeup department lacked her preferred foundation brand. Witnesses recalled her shouting at the head artist and demanding someone drive to Beverly Hills immediately to get it. Carson himself eventually called her, telling her, "Zsa Zsa, you already look beautiful. We have a show to do. Let's save the cosmetics drama for later." What frustrated Carson most wasn't just her vanity, but the disruption it caused to the entire production. Other celebrities were left waiting, crews worked overtime, and the evening's rhythm collapsed. After one night where she arrived nearly an hour late and then complained about her introduction, Carson told his producer, "If she comes back, tell her the show's been renamed The Tonight Show starring Zsa Zsa Gabor, and I'll just be her co-host." Yet despite everything, she remained a fixture on the program, proof of how magnetic she was once the cameras rolled. And while Gabor's diva behavior caused endless logistical headaches, Carson's next troublesome guest brought with them a very different kind of strain. A sudden shift in mood could transform a fun interview into an awkward clash. Loud, brash, and overbearing, she often dominated the stage. Shelley Winters carried a reputation as Hollywood's powder keg. Her resume included 2 Academy Awards and a career stretching across generations. She moved from glamorous leads in her youth to colorful supporting roles in her later years. On paper, she looked like the perfect Tonight Show guest, glittering career and endless stories from Tinseltown. Behind the curtain, however, crew members warned Carson that Winters could be wildly unpredictable. After one fiery taping, Carson joked privately, "Shelley doesn't converse, she explodes." Staff quickly learned she wasn't interested in following the breezy, late-night formula. Instead of swapping funny memories or plugging a project, she veered into political tirades or personal revelations that left Carson cornered. In one 1970 spot, a simple question about her latest film turned into a 5-minute lecture on government corruption, leaving Johnny scrambling for a graceful exit. Carson usually steered conversations with ease. With Winters, it felt like trying to control a storm, said one director. His only option was to wait her out. Her volatility didn't end with her words. Physical outbursts also became part of her legacy. On a British program, she famously hurled whiskey at Oliver Reed after enduring his sexist remarks. That kind of unpredictability put Tonight Show staff on edge. A stage manager admitted, "Before her segments, we'd quietly remove anything throwable from the set." What separated Winters from some of Carson's other problem guests was the sense that her fire came from conviction, not vanity. She cared passionately about politics and social causes and used every spotlight as a pulpit, no matter the occasion. Carson, though often visibly uneasy, still respected her sincerity. After she blasted the Vietnam War on air, he remarked off camera, "She may not be easy company, but she means every word she says." Even so, her visits became fewer as Carson leaned toward guests who matched the show's lighter rhythm. If Winters tested Carson's patience through passion, his next difficult guest stirred something far more personal, politics that clashed with his values. Known for her beauty and box office appeal, Jane Russell symbolized 1940s Hollywood glamour. With classics like The Outlaw and Gentlemen Prefer Blondes, she seemed like a natural fixture for The Tonight Show. Yet after a handful of early appearances in the 70s, her seat on Carson's couch all but vanished. Insiders explained Carson grew uneasy with Russell's hardline political stances and alleged mistreatment of LGBTQ+ staff. Though Johnny identified as a moderate Republican, he worked hard to keep The Tonight Show clear of divisive debates. Russell, however, reportedly aired her extreme views backstage, sparking tension. One producer noted, "Johnny was fine with differing opinions. What he couldn't stand was cruelty directed at his staff or fellow guests." Reports circulated that Russell insulted LGBTQ+ employees and once refused to let a gay makeup artist work on her. Even more troubling, she allegedly declined to appear alongside Rock Hudson, citing his sexuality. Though not publicly acknowledged then, Hollywood circles knew the truth, and Johnny, protective of friends in the gay community, took offense. The breaking point came in 1973 when Russell dismissed civil rights reforms during a commercial break. Crew overheard, word spread, and Carson decided he'd had enough. After that, she was never booked again. For Carson, who rarely banned anyone outright, this was extraordinary. Russell's star power and legacy might have earned others a second chance, but her words sealed the door shut. The rift underscored just how strongly Carson opposed her conduct, and while Russell's politics cost her a Tonight Show future, Carson's deepest disdain was saved for a comic whose act and private behavior clashed in ways the host could never forgive. Carson once described Jerry Lewis as nothing less than truly hateful. Lewis became one of the biggest names in American show business, celebrated as a comedian, actor, filmmaker, and philanthropist who ran annual telethons to raise money for muscular dystrophy research. His wild physical comedy and unpredictable energy propelled him to worldwide stardom. Behind closed doors, however, Tonight Show crew members recalled him as one of Hollywood's most condescending and unpleasant stars, which earned him a firm spot on Carson's private blacklist. Carson allegedly remarked after one particularly disastrous appearance in the mid-1970s, "That's what happens when ego completely overshadows talent." Unlike other troublesome guests who limited their mistreatment to staff, Lewis openly displayed his contempt for Carson himself. During one infamous visit, he constantly interrupted, redirected questions meant for others, and even leaned over to adjust Carson's tie without asking, something that deeply irritated the usually unshakable host. Carson despised anyone touching him without consent. A former producer later said, "Everyone knew the rule. You never lay a hand on Johnny unless he initiates it." Lewis, aware of this, crossed the line intentionally to assert control. When it came to treating crew members, Lewis's behavior was described as even worse. Reports claimed he ignored staff names, referring to people only by their job titles: camera guy, makeup girl, no matter their age or seniority. In one shocking rehearsal incident, a cameraman's quiet cough set Lewis off. Witnesses recalled Lewis halting everything and exploding with insults, accusing the operator of breathing like an amateur and demanding his removal from the stage. A floor manager who watched it happen confirmed Jerry screamed at a cameraman for breathing too loud. Not talking, breathing. The poor man just had allergies. For Carson, the hardest part to stomach was the hypocrisy between Jerry Lewis's public image as a children's advocate and his private cruelty toward people who couldn't advance his career. A producer who worked closely with Carson remembered the Jekyll and Hyde act made Johnny sick. He'd cry on TV about loving kids, then come here and treat staff like dirt. After Lewis's last Tonight Show appearance in the early 1980s, Carson reportedly told his producer, "Never bring him back." Although Carson rarely imposed outright bans, Lewis ended up among the handful of stars effectively blacklisted for the remainder of the show's run. Years later, during a private dinner, Carson's remark about Lewis stunned those listening with its unusual bluntness. In a city full of fakes, he manages to stand out as truly hateful, and that's saying something. Carson's secret blacklist exposes something deeper about Hollywood's polished image. His candid views on Joan Crawford, Frank Sinatra, Orson Welles, Bette Davis, Mickey Rooney, Zsa Zsa Gabor, Shelley Winters, Jane Russell, and Jerry Lewis cut through the glitter and reveal what the industry really looked like behind the scenes. A longtime Tonight Show producer explained, "Johnny was the gatekeeper. For 3 decades, every major celebrity had to pass through him to reach America's living rooms. He could tell instantly who was authentic and who was pretending." What makes his observations so important is that Johnny had nothing to gain from trashing anyone, and much to lose if his honesty ruined future bookings. A producer who knew him well explained, "Johnny wasn't hunting for feuds. He wanted smooth interviews. When he disliked a guest, it was only because they gave him no alternative." Johnny's unique role as both confidant and filter for the stars gave him rare insight into celebrity culture. On his couch, famous figures often showed sides of themselves they never revealed elsewhere, making his private judgments even more revealing. He distinguished between harmless quirks and genuine malice. Fame might excuse eccentricity or nerves, but cruelty toward the powerless was something Carson would not forgive. His longtime director recalled Carson's simple yardstick. How did they treat the assistants, the crew, the pages? That told him everything about their character. Since Carson's passing in 2005, many of his private opinions have proven accurate. Christina Crawford's claims about her mother Joan, evidence of Sinatra's mob connections, and disturbing accounts of Mickey Rooney's behavior have all since been verified. This shows Carson wasn't exaggerating. He was spotting real flaws hidden by Hollywood's spin. Perhaps the most unsettling part of his blacklist is how effectively the industry protected these stars. Decades before social media or cancel culture, celebrities could maintain perfect public reputations while behaving terribly in private, confident that studios, networks, and magazines would shield them to preserve their market value. In today's world, a single phone recording might destroy a reputation, noted a former Tonight Show insider. Back in those days, someone could hurl a chair at an assistant, and as long as they filled theaters, the story stayed locked inside the studio. When revisiting Hollywood's so-called golden era, Carson's blunt takes become a sharp reminder that our legendary figures were always flawed, layered, and deeply human. At times uplifting, at other times disheartening, and occasionally downright unsettling beneath the polished image they projected. Johnny often remarked, "A camera doesn't only change how you look, it creates an illusion," remembered his longtime producer. What made him remarkable wasn't only his charm as an interviewer, but his uncanny ability to cut through that illusion and reveal what was real. We appreciate you joining us for this look at Johnny Carson's toughest guests. If you enjoyed uncovering this hidden side of television's golden era, be sure to give the video a like and subscribe for more untold stories from showbiz. And if the secrets from The Tonight Show caught you off guard, just wait until our next feature on the beloved 80s sitcom where castmates lived in fear of a child star whose behind-the-scenes rages were so explosive that producers installed panic buttons on set. Hit the notification bell so you're first to see this jaw-dropping Hollywood expose when it premieres.